Hello, everyone, and welcome to our free-for-all newcomer tourney. This is game number 1, and we are going to be seeing some players here whose names I cannot currently see. I will check.
My name's YerAnd, by the way, and I'm joined by... Which name do you prefer? MC Game Wizard or your Twitch name?
You know, either is fine. Let's go with Jalbert. Jalbert's easier and sounds a little less silly
Alright.
to say out loud.
Yeah, so this is a map. It's not...
We have Keiyc and SV.
Yeah, I think it's
Well,
Keiyc.
whatever. And
Alright,
finally, MattyRasker.
yeah, Douwef1 and MattyRasker. Yeah. So this is a map with not too many base resources, so... Of course, all of the HQs are available, so it's a little bit easier on the players to actually find a spot. So nomads are an option, and that is one of the HQs that we're seeing. Also, 2 robots, because when there's not a lot of resources, robots are generally
A little
nice.
worried about Keiyc.
Uh,
That iron price and the low steel makes me just a little concerned.
yeah, the market prices aren't really that great. So yeah, he's probably going to take a little bit more time because he only went for 1 iron mine, but hey, he actually gets to the upgrade second, and now
Well, I
he
guess my
can.
concern was
Yeah,
unfounded.
I don't think it was completely unfounded, but he managed to get through it anyway. And overall, I actually quite like his found. He has only low iron, but he has access to that low aluminium, which he can easily transition out of later if he needs to, which he probably will need to as a robot. SV going for a fairly solid found as well. Takes a few too many resources far away from his base, perhaps. That's gonna be pretty heavy on the power side in the long game.
Yeah, we're in a spot where none of the players can really make good power. Part of it is only the Nomad has good silicon.
Well, you say that, but Dow already has a wind turbine running, and there's actually going to be a dust storm coming, so power should not be a problem for them. The only problem is that power isn't very expensive yet, so it's not going to bring in a lot of cash for them. I would say they'd be pretty lucky if they can pay their debt down, and running on a single solar condenser is generally not something that I would advise a scavenger to go for.
I concur.
Generally, you want to have at least a medium carbon quarry with adjacency to get you through the early stages of the game, and then by late game it's probably not enough anyway. Uh, but a single solar condenser is just so little carbon that it's going to be a challenge to upgrade to HQ level 3.
I feel like SV's moved himself into a really strong spot here. If he can actually make use of that Geo, to make all that shipping okay.
The Geo is definitely a huge boon for SVs. That opens up the opportunity to go for the geothermal borehole, and you can just stack buildings around it, which probably isn't the best idea because EMPs are available, but in theory
I'm
it
not
could
in
work.
love with the Black Magic electrolysis reactor, but he does have the water for it, and you know what? Hey, go for it.
Well, he still has some claims open, so I think the Black Magic tile was more a result of him just
Yep, there it goes.
finding the resources to make the transition, but the idea is actually solid. And so far we're seeing the robots just surging ahead a little bit. Keiyc going for that electronics factory, that's actually something I don't agree with. Not just because it's a single tile, even if it's getting adjacency, an electronics tile is just producing so little that it's barely breaking even. And electronics started at half the price, so you don't really need to make them yet. You can just buy them. And instead making something like chemicals or even life support would be probably a little bit
Water
better.
is the way to go.
Yeah, water is a little bit far away from most players, other than Matty, who has been a little slow, but he has access to that water, and I think that should be enough for him to catch up to the people. He also went for an early geothermal plant, um, as well as
See
Keiyc.
that glass price?
Yeah, the upgrade resources are really cheap now.
Dropped off
So,
a freaking cliff.
so it should be relatively easy for everyone to get to the next HQ level.
Well, actually, well, I mean, it's 70 versus 40, you know, it's a little easier for the scavenger.
Yeah, actually, that's a fair point. Scavenger is the only one who's actually using glass, and that might be the thing that Dow needs to help with that carbon situation, which doesn't seem to
You
be
can
too
sell
bad.
20 water and buy like 18 glass.
Yeah, but basically, just water solves your glass problems for your next two HQs. At this point, the real problem for him, of course, is the carbon.
Which a solar flare just came in to, you know, help him along.
It's not enough though. Like you need even more than that. But it's at least a nice
It's
little
the
boon.
best he's going to get.
Yeah. And there we go. The Nomad is actually catching up to HQ level 3. I think part of the reason why SV is actually surging ahead of the other two people, well, it's obvious why Dow is behind on upgrades right now, but the reason SV is ahead is because they did not choose to build a geothermal plant. And I can see the Nomad going for a geo. It's not that bad when you're pulling in a lot of silicon, even though they're only pulling 3 per second, which, okay, that makes it harder, but Keiyc
A lot of
spent...
players underestimate how much debt you can pay just with a plan. You know, like 47,000 is not bad. I've seen people pay through 180,000 win the game.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not so happy with those geothermals because that was a lot of steel, and in the long game it's gonna help a lot. But in the meantime, SV just managed to get 2 wind turbines, and that's basically fixing all of their power problems for now. Although actually, I take that back. They actually mutinied geothermal. That's what's fixing their power problems.
A scavenger HQ has been upgraded.
Black market is a great way to fix your power problem.
Yep, we haven't seen a lot of black market purchases. And that's definitely the thing that most new players struggle with, is just constantly buying everything on cooldown. Sometimes you even want to buy stuff that you don't really need just because it's cheap, just because you know that you're going to use it later, even if you can't find
Yes.
a use for it in this particular moment.
Particularly, you know, that level 4, maybe put some spies down all over his base.
Yeah, that's an option. At the same time, I would argue that it's not necessary at all because goon squads are at 2k, meaning that no one bought a single goon squad this game. Well,
Knowledge
there's
is
the first one.
power.
True, but
Again, it comes back to buy it because it's cheap, you know.
yeah, that's a very fair point.
The robotics HQ has been upgraded.
Electronics consumption starting to be an issue.
Yeah, you know, when you have 2 robots, when you have 1 electronics per second consumed by the colony, you have the Nomad, it's eventually going to get up. And that price, it's not too bad yet, but it's the second highest price on the market. It's just the market has been relatively calm. Well, it's getting there. Like, food is really good. Food is a great market to be in. Steel is a great market to be in. Maybe not for the scavenger.
These players
Nomad.
want power.
Power is amazing. And there's a dust storm coming up, so if you can get a few more wind turbines, you can just basically solve power for yourself for a long time. Which is why I like where SV is in at this point, even though they only have those 2 wind turbines. The dust storm is actually, they're going for a 3rd one, so the dust storm is going to work out really well for them. I'm a little surprised they didn't choose to go for a geothermal after all. I guess steel is really expensive, but it's still, like, it's right there. You can just build it.
So, suggestion for our scavenger, there's a spot in the crater to the north, which is close to some aluminum, got some carbon. It's a little bit cramped, but probably would be keeping you in the game right now.
That's a fair suggestion. I don't know if I generally like scavenger on this map at all. The only good source of carbon is the one that Keiyc has in the northeast. And that one was not really available because the Nomad got in the way. But I guess you can try to run on low carbon and then add in some of those solar condensers to help you out, because on their own you're sitting on HQ level 3 because the solar condensers just don't bring enough carbon to help you out. And of course there were 2 dust storms, which just makes everything even worse. So solar condensers are really good as a sort of supplementary source of carbon if you're a scavenger, or just a decent source of carbon if you don't use it for every single building that you build.
If you are a robot, your solar condenser is going to be great for oxygen too.
Yeah, and you can get those little tiny adjacency bonuses if you build glass next to it, etc. So far, seems like SV is just in a dominating leading position, because the Nomad finally got to HQ level 4, still lagging behind. I'm not 100% certain why. I would say it's just because 3 silicon per second, they're essentially in a similar spot that the scavenger is, just not enough base resource for production. And then some of
small
these buildings,
critique.
yeah,
For Matty, the adjacency is not great.
yeah. There's a lot of water. Water was very expensive, but I'm not sure why they chose to take all these small tiles as opposed to taking the high tile and the medium tile for adjacency. So instead of spending 4 claims to give you, what, 5 water per second, you would have basically even more with just 2 claims. I think it's 5.25 if you have high and the medium working. And then the advanced buildings also. That is a common mistake for newer players, is that having a single farm, sure, it covers your expenses and you don't gain debt, but it doesn't actually make you money. And you can see now they finally moved into triple reactors as opposed to a single one, so now they're finally going to make some actual cash from that market.
If I were in the Nomad's position right now, I would be looking to transition into all electronics, or at least the farm into electronics, because even if it's only making 0.75 per second, that's closer to your upgrade than you are going to get elsewise.
I guess I would consider getting more silicon. Although silicon is cheap. Of course, the advantage of the Nomad is that they can reclaim some of their tiles, some of these single low water tiles, for instance, and repurpose those as electronics or farms, because farms are bringing in some good cash. But yeah, you gotta do something, because you're not catching up to either of those robots, especially the one with an off-world. At the colony, already shipping food at 36k per launch of your profits.
Matty is going into the patent lab, so, you know, that's what you would want to do if you were that far behind.
Yeah, that is definitely what you want to do. You want to have some sort of an aggressive play, try to get a bunch of patents, try to get some optimizations, just do something, and that is exactly what they're doing. The scavenger, though, unfortunately, they just can't afford to do that. Like, they would like to do that, I'm sure, but you just don't have enough carbon to upgrade, and that's really, really painful.
Keiyc can defend himself, but does he need to?
I think he does. I think if anyone has a chance to stop SV in this game, I think it would be Keiyc. They're on HQ level 5, they have some good production. they're doing this interesting thing where they have reactors and cam refineries next to their geothermal plant, getting a little extra adjacency. Usually not something people necessarily do, mostly because the bonus you get from that is generally very small, and it's usually not worth the shipping cost that you have from shipping both resources towards those buildings and from them.
It is, though, the most viable that strategy's ever been, now that Soren's decided that pirates and magnetic storms aren't going to be around all the time.
Yeah, that is a fair point. People can't exactly punish this, and it also has the added benefit of being away from the main base. So it's not as easy to just freeze the entire base that this robot has.
It's almost like he's playing a little nomad.
A little bit, yeah. Yeah. Meanwhile, I don't know. SV is just buying everything. I don't necessarily agree with Keiyc's decision to help them to buy Dow, because they're not really gonna make that money back very quickly. The scavenger is a little bit too far behind. They're not going to be making a ton of cash, and you're essentially helping the robot buy everyone out quicker than they otherwise would.
When the person who has the most money also has the least debt and probably the most claims? Almost the most claims.
I wasn't really keeping track of what the auctions were. I think there were a few claims that went.
I wasn't
auction.
keeping track even slightly. I'm just saying I can barely see the HQs because I'm clicking back and forward. But the point is they're in a really commanding spot. They've probably got parity with claims.
Yeah, it's. I mean, I'm saying that Keiyc is the one who has the chance to come back. Although, you know, Matty is an HQ level 5. He actually has more stock in himself than Keiyc. He has a little less debt. He has those advanced buildings, which I'm not sure what they were doing so far. He has teleportation, which is nice. I don't think it's necessary, though. He's not really shipping anything other than... well, no, he's not shipping anything at all. So that's...
Maybe he's just driving that power price for no reason.
Yeah. I don't know. Teleportation is a great patent, but it's not the be-all, end-all of world. Like, if you're
Especially
not
as
really
a
shipping,
nomad.
yeah.
Like,
Yeah,
if you can find a spot like that carbon water spot, or not carbon, that silicon water spot to the northwest, then you can just have your choice of alternative spots anywhere on the map. You really don't need to go too crazy if you can find nearby aluminum, which there is.
yeah, that spot is great. I do think that their spot is still perfectly reasonable, because they do have access to silicon on the other one, although it's low silicon. So you kind of have to wonder
It's
why they
just
would
not
go
as
for
good.
that. Yeah, it's just not as good. But mostly on account of that. It's actually a solid second founding location because you have that aluminium, you have carbon nearby. And the SV is going to push for the buy and Keiyc in the meantime. So
If we weren't looking at silicon, I would say for a scavenger, definitely way solid. But again, with a nomad, you can get carbon. You can choose to found that second HQ anywhere, man.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. The spot where they are making their silicon is a great spot for the second HQ.
Oh, I thought you meant second found.
Yeah. Your first HQ, however, would have to be probably in that water patch where you have at least a medium silicon tile, because there are nukes on the black market, but they haven't been used at all so far, and probably won't be used.
The good news is all this theory crafting about Matty's going to pay off because it's just him and SV now.
Yeah, unfortunately though, you're up against a person who owns full subsidiary, most of another person, and two off-worlds essentially. One of them being at the center of the colony, getting that sweet 30% launch speed boost. Yeah, Matty goes for a pleasure dome, which is a great idea, and I quite like Actually, I think they used some claim refunds, is what they did. I have to question why they're still in water, but water has actually been moving up and down a little bit, so I guess it's fair. But yeah, those freezes are brutal. There's just no way that they can catch up to SV. So one thing to consider here is what actually were the best founds in this map. I think that Keiyc's found was pretty solid. It doesn't look like much because you're not you only have low tiles next to your HQ, but as a robot you can easily make them work. SV's found is okay. It's a little far away from everything, and I think it has more to do with how they actually played it out. The found itself is I would say somewhat mediocre. A better found would be, well, actually, what would be a better found?
I think that Nomad on the water silicon would be the better. Electronics started off half price to begin with.
Yes, I don't remember how water started, but it probably was fine to crash a lot anyway, no matter how it starts. Yeah, the Nomad was a great founding spot.
One thing
Yeah, go ahead.
is just that a Nomad who has those tiles that they can transition. You know, when water becomes expensive, they've got 500 silicon. All right, we have water pumps now. That's when you get into the danger zone, because then they don't need to use those return of claims, and they can just use those later down the line on full industry buildings. It's a really powerful strategy to play well as a Nomad and just be looking for those devil tiles.
Yeah, the Nomad is a very flexible faction, and basically having two HQs available to you makes it super flexible. Having those return claims on top of that just makes it
Dare I say overpowered?
well, I don't think Nomads have been actually performing all that well recently for whatever reason. But they were definitely on the overpowered side early on when they were introduced. I think they were
Give it
balanced.
time, friend. Just give it time. People will figure it out, and it's going to be a real pain in the ass.
Yeah, but speaking of a scavenger spot, there actually was some high carbon on the bottom of the map, in the southeast, which was, I think, kind of reasonable. It's far away from water, which makes it awkward.
My main concern is aluminum for that spot.
Oh,
Also,
no,
congrats
but
to SV for your victory.
yep, that's the first point. Your first win in the tournament. The the sudden sub swings in and just takes the game from all the people who have signed up ahead of time. Saves the tournament, but screws everybody in the meantime, in a way.
You know, YerAnd, I think you might have subbed into my Newcomers tournament and beat me.
What? No,
This would have been about a year and a half ago, maybe.
I'm pretty sure I have not subbed in into Newcomers tournaments.
Maybe you subbed in as commentary. I can't even remember now. The point is, it's a tried and true thing to get beat on in your Newcomer tournament. There's no shame in it.
That is absolutely true. That is essentially why we're running these, to help people get better. And it's there's no shame in losing.
If you're gonna take that scavenger spot, this is probably my final thoughts on the map. At least take that low carbon to the north and just make it work.
Yeah, carbon was a pain. If we take a quick look at the balance, at the production stuff, yeah, they ended up not selling any carbon whatsoever, which is really strange. Surprisingly, they didn't buy that much.
You can see SV just had a commanding lead in stock the entire game.
Yeah, they made some really good transitions very early on, and I think that's part of the reason why they managed to get ahead of Keiyc, who was also doing fine. That they just had better building transitions. They moved into reactors, made a lot of money off of that, used the black market a little bit more, I believe. Yeah, they purchased 12 items on the black market. which is a lot more than anyone else.
Well, there you have it.
It's a lot of little things like that that end up mattering in a game of Off-World.